Welcome to the brownstone, where logic triumphs and tempers occasionally flare. Tell us where in the world you're listening. Wolfe may never leave home, but his stories travel well. Subscribe for more mysteries with Nero Wolfe and Archie Goodwin. Every good mystery deserves good company, and a little gratitude between cases. A warm thank you to Norma, our newest patron. Your support keeps the orchids blooming and the mysteries alive. Join the circle of mystery lovers on Patreon. Link in description. Nero Wolfe and the case. Fritz brought from Vienna. At precisely 9:17 that morning, I learned that nothing ruins breakfast like the sound of Fritz Brenner's conscience. I'd been halfway through my eggs and the Gazette when the office bell gave a shy little ding, too polite for a crisis, too early for a salesman. In this brownstone, that tone meant one of two things. The sky was falling, or Fritz had found something that didn't belong in a kitchen. When I opened the door, there he was, pale as unwhipped cream and twice as fragile. He held a small brown parcel against his apron as if it were ticking. Foreign stamps clung to the corners, bright reds and blues I didn't recognize. "From Vienna," he said, his Swiss vowels stretched thin. "It is for Mr. Wolfe." Now Fritz isn't a man to let sentiment run ahead of starch, so the tremor in his voice earned a raised brow from me. "Vienna? What is it? Chocolate or a fan letter from an old girlfriend?" He shook his head. "I do not know. It arrived by courier, not post. The boy said it was marked urgent." That word got Wolfe's attention. He doesn't stir easily before the 11th hour, but the word urgent to him is what free lunch is to me. From behind his desk, surrounded by the eternal siege of books and the aroma of Montenegrin coffee, Wolfe looked up. "Bring it here, Fritz." The package made its way across the Persian rug like a condemned prisoner. Wolfe didn't touch it immediately. He never does. He studied it the way some men study a chessboard or a particularly annoying waiter. "Vienna," he murmured. "The postmark is legitimate. The handwriting, Germanic but feminine. I leaned in. "If it's poison, we can always send it back Saudi." He flicked his gaze at me, the kind of look that would make a dog reconsider barking. "Archie, kindly refrain from flippancy until we ascertain whether it warrants it." "Sure, I'll save my best material for after the explosion." Wolfe reached for his paper knife and slit the tape with the delicacy of a surgeon operating on royalty. Inside was a small wooden box, polished but old, lined in faded blue velvet. Nestled in the center lay a silver utensil, somewhere between a serving fork and a medieval torture device. It gleamed even under the rainlight from the windows. Fritz gasped softly. "Gott im Himmel." Wolfe didn't move. "You recognize it?" "Yes," Fritz whispered. "It is the mark of House Bäumer. The crest, there, on the handle." I squinted. The engraving showed a lion standing on a platter, tail curved like a question mark. "Classy. What is it? A fork for feeding royalty?" "Not royalty." Fritz's voice had gone small. "It is from the restaurant where I worked before the war, in Vienna. House Bäumer was, how you say, famous." Wolfe placed the utensil on a blotter, avoiding fingerprints. "Famous for what?" "For discretion," Fritz said. "For who dined there." I said, "You mean spies, generals, and pretty blondes with too much lipstick." Wolfe frowned. "Please, Archie, restrain your cinema-fed imagination." He turned back to Fritz. "When did you last correspond with anyone connected to that establishment?" "Years. Herr Bäumer wrote me once when I came to New York. He said the world was changed, that some things should stay forgotten." "And now," Wolfe murmured, "he sends you a souvenir." Except the box wasn't addressed to Fritz. It was addressed to Wolfe himself. I noticed that before Wolfe tucked the wrapping into his drawer. "If it's a gift," I said, "someone missed the wedding announcement by 20 years. "Pfui," Wolfe muttered. He reached for the envelope that had fallen out of the lining. The paper was thin, the ink smudged. He opened it with his usual ceremony. 2 sentences in careful script. "For Mr. Nero Wolfe. It will come to you before they do. Protect him." That got the room very quiet. Even the rain on the window seemed to stop for breath. Wolfe read it again, then handed it to me. "Archie, your impressions?" It's either a warning or the worst advertising campaign ever launched. Who's him? Fritz? Fritz took a step back, colour draining faster than a cheap dye. I have done nothing wrong. Nothing. Wolfe's tone softened, which in Wolfian terms is roughly equivalent to a fatherly hug. Sit down, Fritz. Breathe. No one has accused you of wrongdoing. I fetched him a chair. And if you faint, make it toward the rug, not the parquet. Fritz will never forgive himself for water spots. That earned me a glare from Wolfe. He turned the silver object in his hand, eyes narrowing. This was made by Kruger and Zone, Viennese silversmiths. I own several of their pieces. Their crest was discontinued in 1938. Which means this fork, or whatever it is, has been travelling a long time. Not necessarily. The oxidation suggests recent polishing. He glanced up. Fritz, who would have access to such an item now? No one, unless, Fritz swallowed, unless Herr Bäumer's collection survived the war. But it was seized. All his silver, his wines, his art, everything taken. By whom? I asked. He hesitated. By those who wore uniforms. I do not know which ones. That line didn't need translation. I looked at Wolfe, who was staring out the rain-blurred window like a man calculating history. You thinking what I'm thinking? I asked. That would depend, Wolfe said mildly, on whether you are thinking at all. I grinned. That it smells like someone's trying to drag old Europe into our nice modern crime scene, he sighed. You have the instincts of a bloodhound and the diction of a vaudevillian. Still, yes, something of the sort. At 9:48 the telephone rang. Wolfe nodded at me, which is how he delegates danger. I picked up. A clipped voice asked, Mr. Wolfe's residence? That depends who's asking. This is the Austrian consulate. May we speak with Mr. Nero Wolfe? I looked at Wolfe. He's currently busy being suspicious. Can I take a message? The voice hesitated. We have been informed that a parcel intended for him may contain an item of diplomatic concern. Define concern, I said, but the line went dead. When I turned, Wolfe had already pulled open a drawer, revealing a magnifying glass and a packet of gloves. Archie, you will call Mr. Panzer and inform him we may soon have visitors. He is to observe the street discreetly. You expecting a parade? I am expecting, Wolfe said, the inevitable consequence of curiosity. I dialed Saul. He took it calmly. He always does. By the time I hung up, Fritz had retreated into silence so deep you could have fried bacon in it without him noticing. At 10:15 the doorbell rang again. This time it was the courier, young, soaked, looking like he'd lost a fight with the Hudson. He asked for a signature, which Wolfe refused to provide until the boy showed ID. The kid did, and Wolfe signed with a flourish that would have made John Hancock jealous. When the boy left, Wolfe handed me the receipt. Keep that. For what? Souvenir of the morning? For the police when they arrive. That was my cue to raise an eyebrow. You're sure they'll come? Certainly. A murder in Vienna tends to echo, especially when one's name is attached to the resonance. I blinked. Who's dead? He leaned back, closing his eyes briefly. Herr Otto Bäumer, proprietor of House Bäumer. The news appeared in this morning's Gazette, page 6. I checked. There it was. Viennese restaurateur found dead in hotel suite. No details beyond suspected robbery. So, he mailed you this before he got killed? I asked. Apparently. Wolfe's fingers drummed once on the armrest. Archie, you will telephone Lon Cohen. Ask whether the Gazette has received any cables from the Vienna bureau regarding Herr Bäumer's associates. Sure. Shall I tell Lon we're now international? You may tell him, Wolfe said dryly, that unless the world conspires to deprive me of my breakfast again, it will have my gratitude. Fritz looked up. You think this has to do with me, sir? I think, Wolfe replied, that someone believes it does. Until we know who and why, you will not leave this house, understood? Fritz nodded miserably. I said, Want me to frisk him for carving forks? Archie. Wolfe's tone could have frozen boiling soup. Sorry, just trying to lighten the souffle. Phooey. He pressed the bell cord. Fritz jumped, but it was only Theodore arriving with the orchid log. Wolfe glanced at the clock, 10:58. My orchids require attention. We will resume this inquiry at noon. You will, in the meantime, compose a memorandum of our receipt of the parcel and the relevant times. Be exact. Always am. He started for the elevator, then paused. Archie. Yes, sir. If Mr. Kramer should call, inform him that no corpse is presently on the premises. It will save him the trouble of imagining one. Got it. And if someone else shows up claiming diplomatic concern? Offer them a chair, then call me. He disappeared into the elevator, the doors closing with a sigh. I looked at the silver utensil gleaming on his desk, catching the weak daylight like a wink from a ghost. Fritz stood behind me, wringing his hands. Relax, I told him. If silverware could kill a man, I'd have been dead the first time Wolfe ate one of your soufflés. He didn't smile. Outside, the rain kept whispering on the glass. Inside, the brownstone felt smaller than it had an hour ago, like the walls themselves were listening for a knock from Vienna. And I had the uneasy feeling that whatever came through that door next wasn't going to bring flowers. By 2:20 that afternoon, the brownstone had settled into that post-lunch lull where the world forgets to knock. Wolfe was in his chair doing what he calls digesting, a process that looks suspiciously like sleeping upright, and I was at my desk pretending to type notes about the morning's parcel. Fritz had retreated into the kitchen and was making noises that suggested emotional turmoil disguised as soup stock. Then the doorbell rang. Now, in any civilized household, that would be unremarkable. In ours, it was cause for an investigation. Fritz had declared himself allergic to doorbells for the foreseeable future, which left yours truly as the welcoming committee. I wiped my hands, strolled out, and opened the door. Standing there was the kind of woman you'd expect to step out of a perfume ad. Tall, elegant, perfectly put together in black, that whispered mourning, not fashion. Her hat was a small velvet thing with a veil just daring you to peek behind it. One gloved hand held a slim crocodile handbag, the other carried composure like a loaded gun. "Mr. Nero Wolfe?" she asked. The accent was continental, not heavy, but each consonant had been ironed and starched. "He's inside, barricaded behind intellect and indigestion," I said. "You'd better come in before either one gets worse." She managed half a smile, the polite sort a duchess gives to a bellboy, and followed me through the hall. The air carried her perfume, floral, expensive, and the kind that makes you wonder what kind of man ever dared tell her no. In the office, Wolfe opened his eyes but didn't move. The orchids were perfuming the room from their shelf, as if they approved of her wardrobe. I made introductions. "Mrs. Ilse Bäumer, from Vienna. She's here about our breakfast package." Wolfe didn't blink, but something in his jawline froze. "Indeed?" She inclined her head. "You received it?" "Yes, this morning." "Then my husband was right," she murmured. Her fingers tightened on her bag. "He said it would reach you before he was silenced." Now that was the kind of line that gets a detective's blood moving, and Wolfe's was no exception. His eyes opened fully, dark and unreadable. "Silenced?" "My husband is dead," she said simply. "Murdered, 1 week ago in Vienna. Before he died, he left me a message. He said, 'Tell Nero Wolfe the past is coming for us both.'" Fritz would have dropped his ladle hearing that. I just let out a low whistle. "That's a new one. Usually people warn him about creditors, not destiny." She looked at me, faintly puzzled, as though unsure whether Americans were supposed to joke at funerals. Wolfe spared her the trouble of deciding. "You are the widow of Herr Otto Bäumer, proprietor of the House Bäumer restaurant?" "Yes. You knew him?" Wolfe shifted a little in his chair, which for him is equivalent to pacing the floor. "We were acquainted professionally. His establishment was known for its rigor in cuisine, and for certain clients whose appetites extended beyond the plate." Her lips curved faintly. "You speak of politics?" "I speak of appetite," he said. "Political, financial, or otherwise. Your husband's table saw them all." She sat, uninvited but gracefully, as if the chair had been expecting her. "Then you will understand, Mr. Wolfe, why I'm here." He believed something from that time still lived, something that could destroy reputations, perhaps more. I caught Wolfe's glance. It was the look he uses when my mouth is about to do something unwise. Naturally, I ignored it. "You wouldn't be referring to a certain silver fork, would you?" Her gaze snapped to me. "You have it?" "Wolfe has it. I only do the heavy lifting and the clever remarks." "Archie," Wolfe said sharply, "that will do." He turned back to her. "Yes, we have it. What significance does it bear?" She hesitated, then reached into her bag. From it she withdrew a small envelope and slid out a faded photograph. She held it delicately, as though it might burn her. This was taken at House Bäumer in 1937. It was the last year before everything changed. I took it from her gloved hand and gave it a good look. It showed a long dining table, silver gleaming, men in tuxedos and women glittering like chandeliers. Near the edge of the frame, standing stiffly behind them, was a familiar pair. I blinked. Well, if I'd known Wolfe took field trips to Europe, I'd have checked the travel receipts. He gave me a glare that would have melted wax. Archie. But there was no denying it. A younger Wolfe stood there, less broad but equally immovable, beside a much younger Fritz in chef's whites, both caught mid-glance, unaware of the camera. Mrs. Bäumer nodded. You see, you were both there. You remember that night? I do not indulge nostalgia, Wolfe said. It is a poor vintage. But you were present when the silver was commissioned, she pressed, each piece engraved with the lion crest. My husband told me one set was hidden before the confiscations began. Confiscations, I asked. The occupation, she said softly. Everything of value was seized, property, art, even recipes. My husband escaped, but the silver vanished. When he learned some of it had resurfaced, he tried to recover it. Days later, he was dead. She looked straight at Wolfe. And now it has reached you. I think you know why. Wolfe folded his hands, fingertips touching. Madam, if you expect me to share your certainty, you will be disappointed. Objects travel. They are not responsible for the hands that move them. Her eyes flashed. Then you will not help me. I did not say that, Wolfe replied. I said I am not yet convinced what help you require. It was my turn to step in. Let's clarify. You're saying your husband sent that silver thing to Wolfe before he got himself killed. You think whoever killed him might come looking for it here? Yes, and for anyone connected to it. That would include Fritz, she nodded once. He was part of it, wasn't he? The dinners, the guests. Fritz cooked, I said. He didn't spy. Her expression softened. I don't accuse him. I'm only afraid for him. That last line landed hard enough to quiet even my wisecracks. Wolfe regarded her for a long moment. Mrs. Bäumer, if your husband was indeed murdered for reasons tied to this relic, then the threat you describe will come, inevitably. Have you told the authorities? She smiled faintly. Vienna's authorities? Or ours? Either way, they will do nothing. My husband's name was once respected. Now it is a footnote. Phooey, Wolfe muttered. Reputation is the flimsiest armour. Still, your courage in coming here is commendable. I couldn't resist. That's as close to gallantry as he gets, ma'am. Frame it. Archie, Wolfe warned. Just lightening the mood. The lady's already wearing enough black for both of us. She gave a small, real laugh, the first one of the afternoon. You have an unusual partner, Mr. Wolfe. Indeed, Wolfe said dryly, and an inopportune sense of humour. I leaned back. So what's next? Do we guard the silver until the ghosts of Vienna arrive? Not ghosts, Wolfe said. Men. Ambitious, frightened, greedy. Men who understand that history can be both weapon and shield. Mrs. Bäumer stood. Then you will help me? He hesitated, and I saw it. That flicker of conflict he usually hides behind Latin quotations. Finally he said, I will consider it. But you must understand, madam, I do not act from sentiment. Nor do I, she replied. I act from fear. Her poise cracked just enough to show it wasn't an act. Wolfe reached for the bell cord. Fritz, he said, when the chef appeared, drying his hands on a towel. See that Mrs. Bäumer is given tea. Fritz froze when he saw her, then flushed. Madame. You remember me? She asked gently. Yes, he whispered. From the nights at House Bäumer. You, your husband. She placed a hand on his arm. It was not your fault, Fritz. He blinked rapidly, stepped back. Wolfe's tone was a quiet order. Archie, accompany Mrs. Bäumer to the dining room. I must think. I escorted her out, leaving Wolfe behind the barricade of his thoughts. When I came back 10 minutes later, he was staring at the photograph. The silver fork lay beside it like an exhibit in an invisible trial. Well, I said. He looked up. The past, Archie, has an unseemly habit of remaining present. We shall have to inquire delicately. Meaning I get to pound the pavement while you commune with orchids. Meaning, he said evenly, that I trust you to distinguish between curiosity and recklessness. The lady is vulnerable. Treat her accordingly." That, from Wolfe, was the equivalent of an oath of chivalry. I grinned. "Sure, I'll be gentle, unless someone objects." "Pfui, go type your memorandum." I started for the desk, then glanced at the photograph once more. The young Wolfe and Fritz stood frozen in another century, unaware that someday their ghosts would come calling. "Funny thing," I said, "you never told me about your European escapades." "Because they were none of your affair," he said curtly. "Still, I'd have paid good money to see you abroad. Did you ride gondolas or interrogate waiters?" He closed his eyes. "Archie, if you persist in this juvenile inquisition, I shall forego dinner." That got my attention. All right. I'll shut up. No need to endanger Fritz's souffle." He grunted. The elevator light clicked on upstairs. Orchid hour approaching. Wolfe reached for the bell cord again. "Fritz!" The chef reappeared, calmer now. "Dinner at 8 as usual," Wolfe said. "And when next you enter my office, bring the Viennese cookbooks from the pantry." "Yes, sir." He vanished again, and Wolfe actually stood, and went to the safe. He placed the silver utensil inside, locked it, and turned to me. "We keep this matter confined within these walls for now." "Understood," I said. "And if Mrs. Boymer's ghosts knock again?" He gave me a glance sharp enough to pin a butterfly. "Then we shall answer politely." At 4 o'clock sharp, he disappeared into the elevator for the orchids, leaving me with the photograph, the typewriter, and a growing suspicion that Vienna had just moved to West 35th Street. I sat down, rolled in a fresh sheet of paper, and started typing. 2:20 p.m. Visitor in morning, name Ilse Boymer. Says her husband was murdered, brought ghosts, perfume, and trouble in equal measure. Then I added one last line for myself. Note, if silverware starts killing people, ask for a raise. By 6 o'clock that evening I was already overdressed for trouble. Wolfe had ordered me out to establish the locus of contagion, which in English meant find out who in New York shared fingerprints with Vienna's ghosts. He stayed planted behind his desk while I went to walk off the calories from Fritz's lunch and possibly collect a clue or two along the way. The Continental Dining Syndicate, I'd learned from a discreet phone call to Lon Cohen, was less a company than a small empire of guilt and gastronomy, a chain of high-class eateries run by Central European émigrés with pedigrees longer than their balance sheets. Their headquarters sat in a Park Avenue building that looked like it had been built entirely to keep ordinary people out. The lobby was a mirrored forest, brass fixtures, marble floors, and the kind of echo that made you feel like you were walking into your own alibi. I gave my hat to a receptionist who looked allergic to jokes and rode the elevator up to the 12th floor, where the brass plate on the frosted door read, "The Continental Dining Syndicate, fine dining, refined investment." Inside, the air smelled of stale cigarettes and nervous ambition. 3 people waited for me. Carl Weigel was first, tall, pale, with hair slicked back to a point sharp enough to slice bread. His accent was Austrian, his smile managerial, and his handshake clammy enough to suggest he'd been counting something that wasn't his. Emil Dorn, the accountant, was shorter, rounder, and had the kind of spectacles that make men look honest when they aren't. He smelled faintly of starch and fear. And then there was Greta Lenz, the secretary. She had copper hair, an efficient smile, and a perfume that could have sponsored a treaty. "I understand you are investigating the matter of Herr Boymer," Weigel said, motioning me toward a chair that looked like it disapproved of Americans. "Investigating's a strong word," I said. "Let's call it curiosity on behalf of Mr. Wolfe. You remember him?" Weigel's mouth twitched. "Of course, the famous detective. Your Mr. Wolfe is still quite large, yes?" "Like the truth," I said. "Hard to move and difficult to ignore." That got a thin smile from Greta and an annoyed glance from Dawn. Weigel cleared his throat. "You are here about the, unfortunate death of our colleague, Herr Boymer. We read the news. Tragic." "Sure," I said, "especially since a piece of his cutlery decided to take a trip across the Atlantic. You fellows wouldn't know how it found my employer's doorstep, would you?" Dawn pushed his glasses up. "Cutlery? I do not understand." "That makes 2 of us," I said easily. "But I'm a patient man. I'll wait while you pretend to remember." Weigel gave a smooth little laugh. "Mr. Goodwin, we are restaurateurs, not smugglers. The Continental Syndicate is a legitimate enterprise. Then you won't mind if I ask how legitimate business gets tangled up in Viennese murders? Silence followed. Tight, uncomfortable. Greta's typewriter clacked once like a nervous tick. Weigel spread his hands. We had business with Herr Bäumer before the war. We helped him invest in properties here. He was sentimental. He wanted to rebuild his restaurant in America. But such dreams rarely survive oceans. I glanced around. The office was big enough to house 2 dreams and a scandal. Looks like the dream landed fine. Weigel smiled too quickly. Appearances, Mr. Goodwin, are the currency of our trade. Dawn coughed into his handkerchief. You will forgive us, but we have clients waiting. Greta interrupted softly. Mr. Goodwin, would you like some coffee? That got my attention. Her tone was polite, but her eyes flicked toward Dawn with something that wasn't office camaraderie. Sure, I said. I never turn down free coffee. She led me to a small kitchenette adjoining the office. It was tiled in mint green and smelled faintly of polish. She filled a cup, added sugar, then slipped a folded scrap of paper under the saucer. When she turned, her expression was steady. Please tell Mr. Wolfe that I admired his book on sauces, she said aloud, then added under her breath, Don't trust the accountant. I took the cup and said, I'll make sure he hears that. About the sauces, I mean. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Yes, of course. Back in the office, Weigel and Dawn were mid-argument in German. They stopped when I entered, pretending to rearrange papers. Thanks for the chat, I said. If I get hungry for schnitzel, I'll look you up. Weigel inclined his head. Do, please. Our table is always open to friends of Mr. Wolfe. Good, I said. I'll bring him. Just make sure you reinforce the floorboards. Their laughter followed me to the elevator, the hollow kind that stops 2 seconds after the door closes. Downstairs, I read the note. The handwriting was small, hurried. Don't trust the accountant. A red herring, maybe, but I've learned that when a pretty woman tells you not to trust someone, she's either saving your life or your wallet. Sometimes both. By the time I hit the street, the noon crowd was streaming toward lunch. The sky was bright, but thin, like a good lie. I stopped at a phone booth and called the brownstone. Fritz answered, sounding relieved to hear a human voice instead of his conscience. Mr. Wolfe is at the table, he said. Shall I disturb him? You already did, Fritz, by answering. He sighed. 1 moment, please. Wolfe's voice came through, slow and resonant. Report. I found our Viennese circle. 3 expats running a restaurant empire and pretending they're not nervous. The accountant's sweating harder than a prizefighter. The secretary slipped me a note. What did it say? Not to trust the accountant. Indeed. Wolfe paused long enough to let me picture his eyebrows climbing. Have you acquired anything tangible? Just caffeine and suspicion. Then return. We dine at 7. Any particular attire? Your customary irreverence will suffice. At 7 sharp, I was home, and Fritz was dishing up veal with something delicate and continental that smelled like apology. Wolfe was already seated, the silver gleaming, the orchids perfuming the air with smug superiority. I gave him the note. He read it, folded it, and slid it beside his plate as if it were a menu. Greta Lentz, he murmured, a woman who sees more than she is permitted to speak. Admirable. I'd call her scared, I said. She's working for 2 men who could use a long talk with a customs agent. He ignored that, reaching instead for a sheet of paper from the pile beside him. This, Archie, is a copy of the customs declaration attached to the parcel Fritz received. Observe the signature. I leaned over. E. Dawn, the accountant. Precisely. So our man with the honest spectacles is the one who shipped the silver? Not necessarily. Wolfe dabbed his mouth with his napkin. But it is the first tangible connection between Vienna and New York. That he signed the slip suggests either complicity or coercion. Or both, I said. Maybe he's laundering guilt along with tablecloths. He gave me a long look. Archie, your facility for metaphor would be more valuable if it led anywhere. You will, however, keep Mr. Dawn under observation. You think he's our next corpse? I think, Wolfe said, that anyone who handles contraband this old and this delicate tends to mishandle it fatally. Fritz entered to clear the plates, his eyes flicking to me anxiously. I gave him a reassuring nod. Wolfe noticed. Mr. Goodwin, he said, his tone softening just a fraction. "You will see to Mr. Brenner's safety as one guards one's palate. He is not to be alone outside this house until we understand who sent that box and why." "Understood," I said. "And if I need backup?" "Saul Pantzer is available. I shall telephone him after the orchids." That was Wolfe for "take care of yourself," but he'd rather drink vinegar than say it out loud. "Sure," I said. "I'll post myself outside Dawn's building after dinner. If he sneezes, I'll send you a telegram." Wolfe grunted. "You will not risk confrontation. Merely observe. Our quarry will expose himself soon enough, through appetite or arrogance." He reached for the bell cord. "Fritz, coffee." The tray arrived, gleaming, aromatic. I took my cup and stretched my legs. "You realize, boss, that all this silver and sauce business smells like money laundering with extra seasoning." "Pfui," Wolfe said. "Money is a vulgar lubricant. This affair concerns conscience." "Maybe, but conscience doesn't usually get mailed in velvet boxes." He sipped his coffee, eyes half closed. "No, it gets mailed in fear." At 7:30 he pushed back his chair. "You will prepare a memorandum for my files, names, impressions, and your note from Miss Lenz. Then rest. We resume at 6. 6? What happens at 6? "Dinner." I stood. "Of course. Silly me." He frowned. "You mock the ritual, yet it preserves us. Now go." As I turned toward the office, he added, "Archie." "Yeah?" "Should Inspector Kramer telephone, he will, inevitably, inform him that my office remains unsullied by corpses, for the moment." "Sure. I'll even sound convincing." Wolfe closed his eyes again, signaling the end of conversation. Fritz whisked away the coffee cups with funereal grace. Back at my desk, I rolled in a fresh sheet and began typing up the memorandum. Met the Continental Dining Syndicate, Park Avenue. Decor, gilt and gold leaf. Manager slick, accountant sweating, secretary nervous enough to warn me. Note says, "Don't trust the accountant." Wouldn't anyway. Dawn's signature appears on customs slip for our Viennese silver souvenir. Possible link to Boimer murder, awaiting confirmation, or explosion. I signed it, Archie Goodwin, folded the sheet, and put it on Wolfe's blotter. Outside, the city kept eating its lunch, oblivious to how many knives were on the table. At 6:30 the next morning, the brownstone decided to remind us that domestic bliss is for amateurs. I was in the hall, half-dressed and debating whether coffee or consciousness should come first, when I heard a sound no man should hear from a kitchen run by Fritz Brenner, a strangled gasp followed by the crash of something porcelain. By the time I got there, Fritz was standing in the doorway, white as whipped cream and twice as wobbly. His eyes weren't on me. They were fixed on the floor by the pantry. "Mr. Goodwin," he breathed and pointed. I looked. Then I said a few words that wouldn't make it past the radio sensors. Carl Weigel, late of the Continental Dining Syndicate, lay sprawled on the tiles, face turned to the oven, a dark stain spreading under him like spilled coffee. A carving fork, one of Fritz's best, and identical to the one that came in our Viennese care package, was buried in his chest. If murder had a sense of irony, I said, it'd use a carving fork in a chef's house. Fritz made a small choking sound. "He is dead." "Sharp eye, Fritz." I bent, checked the pulse anyway, and straightened. "You didn't invite him to breakfast, I take it?" He shook his head violently. "I have never seen him alive. Never." Which was just the kind of quote Kramer would love engraved on an arrest sheet. I said, "Step back. Don't touch anything. Not a drawer, not the phone." I reached for the wall phone myself and called the police. They arrived in 7 minutes, which set a new record for Manhattan civic efficiency. By the 8th minute, the kitchen looked like a Broadway opening, uniforms everywhere, notebooks flashing, cameras popping, and leading the parade was Inspector Kramer himself, cigar already lit and temper pre-lit. "Goodwin," he barked, "you couldn't go a week without dragging us to this address." "Don't blame me," I said. "I didn't order the corpse. It came special delivery." He shoved past me, his cigar smoke battling the smell of blood and polish. Pearly Stebbins followed, scowling like the world's angriest refrigerator. Kramer crouched over the body, grunted. "Weigel? One of those fancy restaurant boys, huh? You know him?" "I met him yesterday. He was vertical then." Kramer gave me a look. "And what was he doing here this morning?" "You're the cop," I said. "You tell me." He bit the cigar. "Don't tempt me." From behind us came the sound of deliberate footsteps, the kind that didn't hurry for anyone. Wolfe filled the doorway like a verdict, bathrobe belted, expression unreadable. "Inspector," he said, in that tone that could freeze champagne, "kindly remove your men from my kitchen. I will not have boots tracking detritus over my tiles." Kramer straightened. "You've got a body on your floor, Wolfe. My men stay till it's bagged." "Pfui, my cook is distraught. You will confine your activities to essentials." I said quickly, "The essential part is figuring out why Mr. Weigel came here to audition as a corpse." Kramer ignored me and waved to Pearlie. "Get the photographer in, then check the pockets." Pearlie knelt, muttered, and came up with a torn slip of paper. "Looks like an invoice, Chief. Stamped House Boymer, 1937. Half a name left. E.D.N." Kramer turned it over. "Mean anything to you, Wolfe?" Wolfe's eyes flickered. "Possibly, but not until I've had coffee." "That's not how this works," Kramer snapped. "Your chef here is looking mighty nervous." Fritz, standing rigid by the sink, swallowed hard. "Inspector, Wolfe's voice cut in, quiet but lethal. "Mr. Brenner will answer no questions without counsel." Kramer swung toward him. "He's a material witness, maybe worse. Don't start hiding behind your fancy Latin, Wolfe." "Inspector," Wolfe said, leaning on the doorframe, "I do not hide behind Latin. I shield those in my employ from vulgarity, legal or otherwise. If you intend to arrest him, do so and face the consequences. Otherwise, I suggest you limit your questioning to Mr. Goodwin." Kramer's jaw worked. "You always were a pain in the—" He stopped himself, then blew smoke through his nose. "Fine, we'll wait for the coroner." Pearlie rose, glancing at the fork. "That the same kind that came in your mystery package?" I nodded. "Viennese vintage, stainless conscience." Kramer eyed me. "You think this ties to that thing Mrs. Boymer brought you?" "I think," I said, "it ties to the parcel she sent. Vienna's calling card, not coincidence." "Don't get cute, Goodwin." "Too late. It's congenital." He turned back to Wolfe. "You'd better come clean about what you're mixed up in. A guy from that restaurant syndicate ends up stabbed with your cook's utensil, in your kitchen, and you're telling me it's coincidence." Wolfe's eyes half closed. "Inspector, in this house we appreciate irony, not coincidence. Nevertheless, I assure you we did not invite Mr. Weigel to expire here. Perhaps he found the surroundings comforting." Kramer snorted. "You're not funny." "I'm not attempting humour." Pearlie muttered. "Maybe the cook let him in for coffee." "Mr. Stebbins," Wolfe said, voice like ice, "Mr. Brenner has served me for 21 years. He would not admit a rat, much less a stranger, without my order." I added, "Besides, Fritz would sooner kill himself than overcook an egg, let alone a man." Kramer rubbed his forehead. "Fine, you're all saints, but I still need statements. Start with you, Goodwin." He herded me to the table, flipped open his notebook. "You found him how?" "I didn't. Fritz did. I just supplied the commentary." "What time?" 6:30, maybe a minute after." "Who else was in the house?" "Wolfe upstairs, Fritz here, me in the hall, unless Theodore decided to grow legs and sneak down from the orchid rooms." Kramer grunted. "Door locked?" "From the inside." He looked up sharply. "You're sure?" "As sure as I am that your cigar's going to burn out that moustache." He scowled. "Then how the hell did Weigel get in?" "Good question," I said. "I was hoping you'd earn your pay by answering it." Pearlie growled. "Maybe he came in last night and waited." "Waited in a kitchen that locks from both sides," I said. "Sure, he must have been fond of refrigerators." Kramer's patience was thinning visibly. "Look, Goodwin, I can hold your chef as a suspect until we sort this out." Wolfe stepped forward. "No, Inspector, you may not. He is distraught, and your men's presence will only deepen his shock. If you persist, I shall telephone the district attorney and protest interference with an investigation of my own." Kramer gave him a long look. "You still running that line about cooperating with the police when it suits you?" Wolfe inclined his head. "Always, Inspector, and I do so now. I will cooperate, provided you do not turn my kitchen into a precinct." Pearlie returned from the doorway. "Coroner's here." Kramer exhaled heavily. "All right, Wolfe. We'll finish up and clear out. But if this ties to your Viennese friends, you'll be seeing a lot more of me." "I look forward to your company," Wolfe said smoothly, "though not at breakfast." Kramer's response was a grunt that might have been profanity in another dialect. He waved his men out, leaving 2 uniforms to stand guard, while the coroner's team went to work. I watched them zip Weigel into a bag. Fritz had retreated to a corner, trembling. When they left, he whispered, "Mr. Wolfe, I swear I did not—" Wolfe raised a hand. "Enough, Fritz. No protestations. You are incapable of such a barbarity." Fritz blinked rapidly. "But why would he come here?" "That," Wolfe said, "is precisely what we must determine." When the last policeman left, the kitchen felt too large and too quiet. I leaned against the counter. "So, boss, we've got a foreign corpse, a matching fork, and a clue that spells half a name. E-D-N. Any bets it's Dawn?" "Not bets, Archie. Deductions. The coincidence is glaring." He moved to the door, his bulk filling it again. "You will fetch that invoice from Inspector Kramer before he misplaces it. Offer him a photostat in exchange." "Sure," I said. "And while I'm at it, I'll ask him to send back our fork." "Phooey, let the police keep their trophies." We went upstairs to the office. Wolfe sat heavily behind his desk, the morning light striking his face at an angle that made it look carved from patience and granite. "Archie," he said, "our adversary escalates. Murder within my walls is an affront, not merely a challenge." "Want me to take that down as an official statement?" "Take it down as an oath. We will find who dared." I grinned. "Now that's the Wolfe I know. Righteous indignation with a side of vengeance." He glared. "You mistake justice for vengeance." "Not really. They just order from the same menu." He grunted, then pressed the bell cord. "Fritz." When the chef appeared, pale but composed, Wolfe's tone softened. "Mr. Brenner, take the day. Rest. Mr. Goodwin and I will attend to the necessary contacts." Fritz hesitated. "But the kitchen—" "Leave it," Wolfe said. "I will not eat now." I raised my brows. "That's serious, huh?" He gave me a look. "Archie, even gastronomy must yield to murder." Fritz nodded miserably and left. When the elevator doors closed behind him, Wolfe turned to me. "Summon Saul Pantzer. Tell him to find Mr. Dawn and observe discreetly. Mr. Weigel's death has not concluded our affair. It has merely begun." "Got it. Anything else?" "Yes. Lock the front door. For once, let us choose our guests." I nodded, heading for the hall. Behind me, Wolfe reached for his beer, his first of the day, though it wasn't yet noon. He poured it into the chilled glass with deliberate calm, then raised it slightly toward the empty kitchen below. "To intrusion," he said softly, "and its correction." I called back, "If you're toasting, make mine ginger ale." He grunted, a sound that meant both reproach and affection. The brownstone went still again, sunlight crawling across the rug like it was afraid to stay too long. We had a corpse on the floor, a clue half-written, and a killer somewhere with a full name. And if I knew Nero Wolfe, that killer had just signed his own menu. Rain in Lower Manhattan is a democratic thing. It makes everyone look equally guilty. By 8:30 that evening, I was standing in front of a building that smelled of wet brick and stale ambition, ringing the bell marked E. Dawn, Accountant. From the hallway came the sound of faint jazz, the kind that apologizes for being alive. When he opened the door, Emil Dawn looked like a man who had slept in his conscience and found it wrinkled. His tie was askew, his eyes bloodshot, and his apartment smelled of imported wine, fear, and furniture polish. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, managing a watery smile. "I had hoped you wouldn't come." "I disappoint people for a living," I said, stepping inside. "You've been a busy man, Mr. Dawn. Your late associate Weigel dropped by my kitchen this morning. Didn't leave in one piece." His hand went to his mouth. "Dead?" "As the Austrian monarchy." He slumped into an armchair. "My God, they said it might happen, but I—" "Who said?" He hesitated, eyes darting toward a decanter. "Weigel was blackmailing me," he blurted. "He found something, old bank transfers, funds that should have been lost in the war. But they weren't. They were moved, hidden. I only handled the paperwork." "Sure," I said. "Every man in prison says he was just handling paperwork." His head jerked up. "It was survival, Mr. Goodwin. You don't understand what those years were like. I don't have to. I just have to understand why a corpse turned up in my employer's kitchen holding your past. He poured himself a drink with trembling hands. Weigel wanted money. He said he would expose me. But someone else found out first. Someone who wants to bury the trail entirely. Who? I don't know. His voice cracked. All I know is that the transfers were tied to a Viennese account, property seized from Jewish owners during the occupation. When the Allies came, the records were adjusted. Some of it went into restaurants, clubs, respectable places, even Haus Bäumer. That name hit like a drum roll. You're telling me your dead partner helped launder blood money through dinner reservations? He rubbed his forehead. Please, don't make it sound theatrical. It was business. Sure, I said, and the Titanic was a boating mishap. He got up, restless, pacing the small room. The jazz crackled behind him, a trumpet wailing through static. Rain blurred the streetlights outside the window, turning everything to watercolor gilt. I didn't kill him, Dawn said again. If I had, I'd have done it years ago. Relax, I'm not the police, but they'll be knocking soon, and when they do, you'd better have something prettier than a sob story. He turned to me, eyes wild. You don't understand. There were others involved, investors, silent partners. One of them knew Fritz Brenner. That got my full attention. Fritz? Yes. His initials were on one of the ledgers, FB, but I swear he was only a name, nothing more. Perhaps a code. Or perhaps a setup. He blinked. What? Nothing. Keep talking. He opened a desk drawer, rummaging. I still have a page, part of a ledger Weigel gave me. Here. He pulled out a half-burned sheet, edges crisped, the ink still legible in the centre. Columns of numbers, a few names, and there it was, FB circled in red pencil. I'd call it a lead, I said, slipping it into an envelope, but it's mostly ashes and bad bookkeeping. Then it happened. A hard crack shattered the room, a brick through the rain-streaked window. It hit the opposite wall and fell with a thud. Dawn yelped, the glass exploding into 100 pieces. Down, I barked, ducking instinctively. But Dawn was already running, not for cover, for the door. Hey! I lunged after him, caught only air. By the time I hit the hallway, he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the stairwell. I stuck my head out the window. Nothing but rain and a wet alley. Whoever threw that brick had vanished, but they'd made their point. Message delivered. Keep your mouth shut. I pocketed the ledger page and left before the neighbours could decide they'd heard gunfire. Back at the brownstone, it was close to 10. Fritz met me at the door, pale but steadier than he'd been that morning. You are unharmed? He asked. Only my suit's feelings, I said. Tell Wolfe I've got a souvenir. Wolfe was in his chair, reading. The air smelled of beer, orchids and philosophy. He didn't look up as I came in. Report. Dawn's alive and jumpy. Claims Weigel was blackmailing him over forged transfers from the war, money laundered through restaurants. Says the record's tied to Haus Bäumer. I got a half-burned ledger page with Fritz's initials on it. That got his eyes up. Fritz. FB could mean him, could mean Fred Brady, could mean Fat Boy's Diner in Queens. But Dawn panicked before I could ask. How so? Someone threw a brick through his window. I'd have called it enthusiasm if he hadn't run like a rabbit. Wolfe extended a hand. I gave him the envelope. He examined the charred edge with delicate fingers, then sniffed. Acid ink. The original ledger was German-made, 1930s vintage. You can smell a decade now? He ignored that. Archie, we are circling the heart of this affair. These men trafficked not merely in food, but in the spoils of atrocity. The past, like rot, seeps through cracks. Yeah, well, the cracks are getting wider. You think Dawn's next on the menu? He leaned back, eyes half closed. Perhaps. Or perhaps he has already served his purpose. In any case, we must preserve what little evidence remains. He folded the page carefully, slid it into an envelope and sealed it with a press of his finger. Mr. Brenner must not see this until we are certain of its context. His heart would suffer. That's one way to put it. I dropped into my chair. So what's our next step? Wolfe's gaze was distant, like he was tasting something bitter. Weigel dead, Dawn fleeing. The next will be the woman, Miss Lenz. Guilt shifts to the weaker vessel. She may run, or she may call for help. And when she does, answer promptly. He reached for his beer. You were nearly injured tonight. You will not pursue further until morning. Sure, I said. I'll sit here twiddling my morals. He gave me a small frown that almost passed for concern. Archie, your flippancy is armor, but not proof against bricks. Be prudent. Thanks, Doc. Pfui, go write your report. I started for the desk, then paused. You know, if truth's what we're after, it's burning hotter than that ledger. He looked at the envelope, then at me. Truth, like good stock, he said quietly, requires heat. Fritz appeared in the doorway. Dinner is served, he announced, voice steadier now. Wolfe nodded. Very well. As he rose, his version of charging into battle, I said, If you ask me, this case has gone from rare to charred. He grunted. And yet, Mr. Goodwin, we must chew it. I followed him to the dining room, where the silver gleamed and the rain kept whispering at the windows like someone outside had unfinished business. By 11 that night, the brownstone felt like it was holding its breath. Rain whispered against the windows, and the city outside seemed too far away to help. Wolfe sat behind his desk, lamplight edging his face in amber, while Fritz stood near the door, wringing his hands like he was trying to dry them on his guilt. I was at my usual station, notebook ready, though this didn't look like a case that would end up in tidy bullet points. Fritz's apron was spotless, but the man inside it was frayed. Mr. Wolfe, he began, voice shaking, I must speak. I cannot, how you say, keep it inside any longer. Wolfe looked up from his book, marking the page with a card. If you intend to confess to murder, Fritz, I will interrupt you, otherwise proceed. Fritz gave a small, strangled laugh that died halfway out. No, sir, not murder, but a sin, perhaps, a great foolishness. He came forward, stopped in the pool of light. You know I worked in Vienna before the war, at Haus Bäumer. It was not only a restaurant, it was a refuge. People came not just to dine, but to meet, to trade, to hide what could not be kept elsewhere. Wolfe inclined his head. Valuables. Yes, Fritz swallowed. Silver, paintings, jewels, recipes, anything that could be smuggled as property of the house. Herr Bäumer wanted to save what belonged to our patrons. He said we would return it one day, when madness passed. I said, sounds civic-minded. I assume the customs office didn't get an invite. Fritz's eyes darted to me. It was not for profit, Mr. Goodwin, it was mercy. But after the annexation, after the brown uniforms came, everything changed. The lists, the inspections, the arrests. He paused, voice dropping. Herr Bäumer arranged one last shipment, packed among the kitchenware. I helped him seal the crates myself. And there was another man there that night, Emil Dorn. That name had become a regular guest lately, but this was the first time it looked like it might pay rent. Dorn, I said, the accountant. Fritz nodded. He came to check the manifests. He said it was for the authorities, but I saw him pocket a slip with the bank code. Later I learned he kept one of the silver sets for himself. Herr Bäumer never knew. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. And this utensil, the one sent to me? It was part of that set. I would know the pattern anywhere. The silence that followed had weight. Even the clock seemed embarrassed to tick. I said, So, you're telling us Dorn's been laundering Vienna through cutlery, and someone's decided to stir the pot. Fritz's face tightened. I did not know of it until the package came, but whoever sent it, perhaps they mean to show that I was part of it. To shame me. Wolfe shifted slightly, which for him is the same as another man slamming a fist. Pfui, shame is the tax of survival. Fritz blinked. Sir? During war, Wolfe said evenly, men do what they must to keep life intact. You preserved what beauty you could. If that is sin, it is one the Almighty will forgive before I do. It wasn't often I saw Fritz cry. He managed not to now, but only by gripping the back of the chair so hard the wood creaked. You are too kind, Mr. Wolfe. Wolfe leaned back, fingers steepled. Kindness is inefficacious. I'm practical. Someone means to use your past as leverage. They expect remorse to make you malleable. It must not. I couldn't resist. Only Nero Wolfe could turn a man's soul-searching into a cross-examination. He gave me a sidelong glare. Archie, confine your levity. It does not befit the hour. Sure, I said, but the hour could use it. Fritz shook his head. You do not understand. There is blood on those shipments. Some who gave us their treasures never returned to claim them. And Herr Dorn, he profited. He made accounts. He used their names. I saw his handwriting once, and He stopped. "And you what?" Wolfe prompted. "I said nothing," Fritz whispered. "I thought silence would keep me safe. But now Weigel is dead, and Herr Dorn, he will kill again." I said, "He nearly got his chance. Someone threw a brick through his window right before he vanished." Fritz's eyes widened. "Then he is desperate. He knows I live here. He knows where the silver came." "Calm yourself," Wolfe said sharply. "Panic solves nothing. Guilt even less." The command in his voice worked. Fritz drew a breath and sat. I watched Wolfe watch him, eyes softening the way they only did for orchids and old friends. "Mr. Brenner," Wolfe said quietly, "did you personally retain any of these items?" "No. I sent what little I owned ahead, but it was lost. I brought only my knives." "Then you are innocent of theft, but not of cowardice." "Cowardice?" Wolfe's tone sharpened. "You mistake prudence for cowardice. You lived. That is a triumph, not a shame." He gestured to me. "Archie, note that Mr. Dorn's presence at the final shipment marks him as our nexus. The motive for Weigel's death lies in that night." "Got it." I jotted it down. Vienna, shipment, Dorn. Maybe we should rename the case Silver and Sin. "Pfui." Fritz managed a weak smile. "You two, always with jokes." "Occupational hazard," I said. "Keeps us sane." Wolfe turned to him again. "Fritz, you will speak of this to no one. Not to Inspector Kramer, not even to the butcher should he ask why you require less salt. I will manage the matter." Fritz nodded miserably. If only Herr Bäumer were alive, he would know how to stop this. "He is dead," Wolfe said gently, "but his widow has unwittingly continued his work, delivering the burden to me." I said, "So now we're the warehouse." Wolfe's gaze flicked toward me. "A poor metaphor, but not inaccurate. We must inventory truth before others do." Fritz rose, visibly steadier. "Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. You are kinder than I deserve." "Nonsense," Wolfe said. "Desert is a fiction invented by theologians. Go, sleep. I will call you when I require you." Fritz hesitated at the door. "You believe me?" "Implicitly." When he was gone, Wolfe exhaled, one of those deep, deliberate sighs that means he's thinking about the species and finding it wanting. "Well," I said. "He is blameless," Wolfe murmured. "But that will not protect him. This affair has the stench of retribution, not profit. Dorn must be located." "Saul's on him. You think he's still breathing?" "For the moment. Fear prolongs life." He reached for the bell cord. "Fritz will bring beer for me, and ginger ale for you." "Why not both beer?" "Because your tongue runs faster than your head. I require one of them sober." I grinned. "Then make it 2 ginger ales." When Fritz returned with the tray, Wolfe lifted his glass solemnly. "To endurance," he said. I raised mine. "And to accountants getting what's coming." He gave me a small, weary look. "Archie, you are incorrigible." "Sure," I said, "but you wouldn't trade me." He didn't answer, but the corner of his mouth twitched, the Wolfe version of a smile. Outside, the rain thickened, drumming like knuckles on a closed door. Somewhere out there, Dawn was running out of places to hide. Inside, Wolfe leaned back and said softly, "Conscience is a poor accountant, but it always balances its books." The phone started ringing before dawn, which meant only one of 2 things. Either Kramer had found a body, or Wolfe had found an adjective. Since Wolfe doesn't stir before coffee, I knew it was the first. "Goodwin," I said, trying to sound awake enough to deserve the title. "Get dressed," came Kramer's voice, gravel in a coffee grinder. "Your friend Dawn's turned up strangled in his office. Linen napkin around the neck. You and Wolfe better start explaining why dead men keep orbiting that brownstone of yours." "Inspector, you flatter us. We never take more than 1 corpse per breakfast." "Cut the cute, Goodwin. I'm sending a car." Click. By the time I reached police headquarters, the sun had decided it was too early too. The homicide bureau smelled like stale cigars, floor polish, and suspicion. Kramer was behind his desk, coat off, tie loose, puffing smoke like an industrial plant. He didn't bother with greetings. "You saw Dawn last." "True." He was breathing then. "He isn't now. Found at his desk, napkin knotted like a necktie. Nice brand, imported. You've got a cook with European tastes. Convenient, huh? I sat down. If you're implying Fritz did it, forget it. He's been under house arrest of Wolfe's making. The man hasn't left the brownstone since Weigel auditioned for the morgue. Your say-so won't cut it. Then come watch him make omelettes. He's in the clear, unless ghosts can sneak out for strangling practice. Kramer grunted, flipping a folder open. Napkin came from one of the Continental Syndicate restaurants. Same logo as the ones in Weigel's desk drawer. We've got a pattern, and it stinks. That's your line, Inspector. Mine's following it. He shot me a look. Don't make this worse. I'll question your boss later. Bring a dictionary. He'll enjoy that. Kramer ignored me and waved over Pearlie Stebbins, who lumbered in holding a brown envelope. Photographs from the scene, he said, dropping them with a thud. Kramer slid one across. Dawn's face looked as if death had taken too long making up its mind. His desk was neat except for a single glass of red wine overturned, staining a pile of ledgers. Classy end, I said. You think he toasted himself before getting throttled? Kramer jabbed his cigar at me. You think you're funny, but your chef's got motive, guilt, fear, maybe revenge. If you've got something better, spill it. Sure, I said, a live suspect. Dawn knew something worth killing for. Find who benefits from his silence and you'll get your killer. Hint, it's not the guy sautéing breakfast. Kramer eyed me, chewing the cigar like it owed him money. Then he sighed. Fine. Tell Wolfe I expect a statement by noon. When I got back to West 35th Street, Wolfe was already vertical, an event so rare it deserved its own headline. He was standing by the Globe Bar, pouring himself beer like a man in mourning for civilization. Inspector Kramer called you, he asked without looking up. Called, barked, accused, hung up, the usual. I told him the details. Wolfe grunted. A linen napkin, so refinement persists even in murder. Yeah, Dawn's office decor now includes a corpse. He lowered himself into his chair with a sigh. Archie, our adversary is accelerating. Weigel, Dawn, both silenced. The next target will be the woman. Greta Lentz. Precisely. Mr. Panzer must locate her before the police, or our killer does. He pressed the bell cord. Fritz appeared at the door, pale but resolute. Yes, sir. Breakfast, if you please, and summon Mr. Panzer by telephone. Yes, sir. Fritz withdrew. I said, Kramer thinks you're sheltering a fugitive. Wolfe's brows arched. He thinks too often. Want me to drop by Dawn's office for a look? Not yet. Mr. Panzer first. When Saul arrived an hour later, hat in hand, calm as always, Wolfe briefed him in 20 words. Locate Miss Greta Lentz. She will attempt escape. Begin at her residence, proceed to terminals. Saul nodded, said nothing, and vanished. Fred Durkin came next, punctual and perspiring. Wolfe's orders were brief. Obtain customs manifests for shipments linked to the Continental Syndicate, circa 1940-42. The name Boehmer may appear. Do not ask questions that advertise your curiosity. Fred left, looking like a man who'd just been handed a crossword puzzle in Sanskrit. By noon, the brownstone had settled into its routine hum of quiet plotting. Wolfe sipped his second beer while I typed notes that probably wouldn't survive the day. Then the phone rang again. Saul. She's at Grand Central, he said. Bought a one-way ticket to Havana. Leaves tonight. Havana, I said. If she's heading for Cuba, I hope she likes rum more than subpoenas. Saul's voice was dry. Want me to stop her? Shadow first, I said. We'll see what the big man says. I hung up and turned to Wolfe. Our hostess-turned-secretary's gone tropical. Saul says she's booked for Havana. Wolfe's lids drooped. Flight or guilt, Archie? Could be both. Maybe she's allergic to handcuffs. He made a low sound that might have been amusement. A woman running is often less informative than a woman cornered. So we stop her. Not yet. Let her reveal her contacts. Mr. Panzer will follow discreetly. You will accompany him as far as the docks if she boards a ship. Observe, record, and interfere only if her life is imperiled. Got it. Just another night out with travel bags and espionage. Archie, he said dryly, you are not entirely useless. Coming from Wolfe, that was practically a sonnet. Thanks, I said. I'll embroider it on a pillow. He ignored that and reached for the phone. I must inform Inspector Kramer that Miss Lentz has absconded. Professional courtesy. I grinned. That'll make his morning. He dialed, waited, then said smoothly, Inspector? Nero Wolfe, your case diminishes. Miss Lenz has fled. No, I will not disclose the source. Yes, I will deliver her in due course. Good day. When he hung up, I said, How'd he take it? With grace, if one measures grace by decibel. The clock on the wall clicked over to 1. Wolfe glanced at it, sighed. Lunch. I said, You think Greta's running from guilt or someone chasing her? He leaned back, folding his hands. Escape and exile are twins, Archie. One flees from punishment, the other from memory. Our Miss Lenz may not know which is which. Then what's our move? He closed his eyes. Eat first. Think later. Thinking on an empty stomach is barbarism. Fritz appeared with trays. Veal ragout for Wolfe, chicken salad for me. The smell filled the room, civilized and steady, like the world hadn't just added another corpse to its balance sheet. I said, You know, if we ever run out of suspects, we could just open a restaurant. We've already got the cutlery for it. Phooey, Wolfe muttered, and reached for his fork. By the time he lifted his first bite, the phone rang again. Wolfe didn't move. He just said, Answer it. I did. Saul's voice again. She's not taking a train. She's heading to Pier 87. Ocean liner. Midnight sailing. I relayed it. Wolfe opened his eyes, gleaming like polished amber. Then Archie, the chase proceeds by sea, and if Miss Lenz truly seeks escape, she will find only the noose of inevitability. I grinned. You should write greeting cards. Archie. Yes, sir. Do stop talking and go pack your revolver. The clock struck 1. Outside, the rain had started again, the kind that makes footprints vanish fast. Inside, Wolfe reached for his beer, took one slow sip and murmured, To pursuit, however tedious. I raised my glass of ginger ale. And to Havana, where the drinks are cold and the lies are hotter. If fog had a personality, that night it was sulking. The pier lamps glowed like exhausted cigarettes, and every horn on the Hudson sounded like a ship apologizing for leaving. I had my collar up, hat down, and a good sense that the evening was going to end in either handcuffs or a headline. Greta Lenz appeared out of the mist exactly the way guilt walks, fast, looking back every 6 seconds and clutching a suitcase like it contained her conscience. She was dressed for escape. Dark coat, cheap gloves, and a hat that tried too hard to hide a face that had once been used to candlelight, not dock smoke. When she saw me, she froze. I gave her my friendliest grin, which has terrified tougher people. Good evening, Miss Lenz. Fancy seeing you at a pier with a Havana ticket in your purse. Her breath fogged. Mr. Goodwin, please don't. Don't what? Stop you from joining the rum trade. I stepped closer. You're running from a lot more than customs. I'm leaving everything behind, she said. You should let me. That's the problem. Everything you're leaving keeps showing up dead. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I didn't kill them. A ship's horn drowned her words, long and low. When it faded, she looked up, eyes shining with panic. They'll kill me too. Who's they? The investors, the men behind the restaurants. House Boehmer was only a name. They turned it into a bank. Money stolen from families who disappeared. Dawn found the ledgers. He wanted to expose them, but he was too frightened. So I sent the box to Nero Wolfe. He is, a name they fear. I thought if he had proof. Proof, I said. All we got was a fancy fork. Her hand trembled. The fork was from the same set. It was meant as a signal. There's more. A book, recipes, codes. Recipes? Yes. Herr Boehmer kept the accounts disguised as menus, amounts of sugar and flour for sums of money, initials for names. I found one of them. I hid it where no one but a chef would think to look. And Dawn found out? She nodded. He confronted me, said the book would ruin them all, and me with it. I tried to leave it with him, but someone was already watching. Someone with strong hands and a napkin. Her voice broke. I didn't know he would die. I only wanted to live. I sighed. Lady, I've met saints who sounded guiltier. You'd better hand over that book. I can't. It's not with me. Then where? Her eyes flicked toward the ship. I told you, where a chef would find it. Fritz, I muttered. Of course. Please, she said suddenly, gripping my arm. Tell Mr. Wolfe I never meant to bring harm. I thought if the truth came out... Yeah, the truth. It's a popular theory. The sound of footsteps on planks cut her off. Heavy, deliberate steps. I didn't have to turn to know who owned them. Pearly Stebbins, the NYPD's answer to Granite. "Well, well," he said, voice rough as sandpaper. "Look what the fog coughed up. Goodwin, you really can't resist the dramatic exit scene, can you?" "Inspector's orders," I said. "Greta Lentz, meet Sergeant Stebbins. He's here to make sure nobody goes on a cruise without the city's blessing." Greta went pale. "You—" Pearly took her arm. "Miss, you're wanted for questioning in the Dawn killing." "She didn't kill him," I said. "She just knows who did." "That'll be a refreshing change," Pearly said. "We can get it in writing downtown." Greta's suitcase slipped from her hand and hit the boards with a dull thud. A corner popped open, revealing clothes, a passport, and a small wrapped bundle. Pearly reached it first. "Now what's this?" He unwrapped it, an old linen napkin, creased and stained. "You collect souvenirs, lady?" Her face went blank. "I was keeping it, to remind myself." "Sure," I said, "and I keep bullets as bookmarks." Pearly growled. "You want to come along too, Goodwin?" Tempting, but Wolfe likes me where he can hear me typing. He led Greta away through the fog, her figure dissolving between the lights like smoke. I stood there until the ship's whistle blew again, long and mournful, like a curtain drop. Back at the brownstone, the air was clear, the lamps were golden, and the world made sense again, or at least pretended to. Wolfe was behind his desk, surrounded by notes, ledgers, and something that smelled faintly of cloves. "You've spoken to Miss Lentz," he said without looking up. "She sang a whole opera. Dawn stumbled onto Nazi blood money being laundered through restaurants. Greta sent the package to you because she thought you could expose it. Somebody else decided to expose Dawn instead, via strangulation." Wolfe grunted. "And the proof?" "She says it's in a recipe book. Hidden somewhere only a true chef would find it." At that, Wolfe looked up, eyes sharp as razors. "Fritz." "That's what I figured." "Archie, bring him." I went to the kitchen. Fritz was polishing silverware, probably as a form of therapy. He looked up, startled. "Another murder?" "No, just an autopsy on a cookbook. The boss wants you." When we entered the office, Wolfe gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "Fritz, Miss Lentz implied that a coded ledger exists, concealed within a volume of culinary instruction. Would such a thing ring a bell, or a dinner bell?" Fritz frowned. "I keep many books, sir. Some very old, some from Vienna. But codes? No. Recipes, yes." Wolfe nodded. "Naturally. Yet Miss Lentz insists it would be hidden where only a true chef would find it. Consider, where do chefs hide what they value most?" "In the spice rack," I said. "Second shelf, behind the nutmeg." Wolfe ignored me. "In plain sight, perhaps. A book that is handled often but not examined." Fritz's brow furrowed. "My grandmother's Kochkunst almanac, from Vienna. It is kept in the pantry. I have not opened it in years. It has no practical use now." "Fetch it," Wolfe said quietly. 5 minutes later, Fritz returned with a heavy, leather-bound book, the kind that looked like it belonged in a monastery. Wolfe opened it with surgical care. Between the pages, folded flat, was a single sheet of paper written in tight European script. Fritz gasped. "I did not know." "Evidently," Wolfe said. He scanned the paper, his eyes narrowing. Quantities of sugar, flour, salt, and initials beside them. The recipe is for chocolate torte, yet the measurements are nonsensical. Here, 1 pound of S-Mayer, 1/2 ounce of D-cone. Archie, this is not cuisine. It is restitution disguised as dessert. I whistled. I never thought soufflés could finance war crimes, but there's a first for everything. Wolfe gave me the look he reserves for theological heresy. "Archie, have the sheet photographed immediately, then place it in the safe." Fritz sat, stunned. "Mr. Wolfe, what does it mean?" "It means," Wolfe said, "that Miss Lentz was telling the truth. The investors used food as camouflage for stolen assets. Each recipe records a conversion of blood money into American enterprises." Fritz's face went grey. "Then I helped them." Wolfe's voice cut like a blade. "No. You helped men save remnants of civilization while beasts devoured it. Others corrupted that effort. You will not take their guilt as garnish upon your own." That shut him up, but not the tremor in his hands. I closed the safe and turned back. "What now?" "Now," Wolfe said, "we wait. Miss Lentz will be interrogated. Kramer will bluster. But presently the men behind this will panic, and when they do, they will seek to retrieve what they believe still hidden. We shall be ready." "You mean bait?" "I mean justice." I sat, lighting a cigarette. "You realize Kramer's going to demand that recipe?" "He may demand," Wolfe said. "I shall provide a photostat, blurred where convenient." The phone rang. I picked it up. Kramer's voice exploded through the line. "Goodwin, we've got your woman singing like a parrot. You better come down here and tell me why the hell she thinks Nero Wolfe's sitting on Nazi millions." "Because he's sitting on a cookbook," I said. "What?" "Never mind. Tell Pearlie to bring her safe. She's done running." When I hung up, Wolfe was watching me, unreadable. "She is safe?" he asked. "For now. Kramer says she's scared but cooperative. She swears you're the only man who can clear Fritz." "That is both gratifying and irksome," he murmured. "Mr. Brenner, you will retire. Mr. Goodwin, type a memorandum of all this, seal it, and note that guilt, like yeast, requires heat to rise." "Sure," I said, rolling in my chair. "And you're the oven." "Phooey," he leaned back. "When we confront the true culprits, Archie, remember, they will have wealth and influence but not conscience. Use that deficiency wisely." "Want me to dangle the cookbook?" "Not yet. First let the odor of fear spread." He pressed the bell cord. Fritz reappeared, tray in hand. 2 chilled glasses, one of beer, one of ginger ale. Wolfe raised his. "To recipes," he said solemnly. "May they all come out even," I said. Wolfe's eyes glinted. "Archie, your levity is intolerable." "Yeah," I said. "That's why you keep me." He didn't answer, which was as good as agreement. The fog outside thickened, curling against the windows like smoke from a kitchen fire. Somewhere in that haze were men who thought they'd cooked the books and buried the past. But in this brownstone, the oven was on. Midnight at the brownstone is supposed to be sacred silence. Wolfe in his chair, me in mine, and the world politely outside. But that night, the air felt loaded, like a courtroom waiting for the judge. Every lamp was lit, every curtain drawn. Wolfe's office, usually a fortress of calm intellect, had become a stage, and the curtain was about to rise. Kramer stood by the globe, cigar in one corner of his mouth and exhaustion in the other. Fritz hovered by the doorway, pale as the linen he lived by. Kramer had brought Miss Lenz from headquarters to hear what would be said. Greta sat stiffly on the couch, clutching her handbag like a lifeline. And in the red leather chair opposite Wolfe, draped in black silk, her expression poised between contempt and fatigue, was Ilse Bäumer, the widow, the spider. Wolfe didn't move. He never did when it mattered most. His bulk was still as marble, his fingers steepled under his chin. The only motion in the room came from the slow swirl of cigar smoke and the ticking of the wall clock. At exactly 12:01, Wolfe spoke. "Inspector Kramer," he said, "the truth, like a souffle, requires careful preparation. Too soon, and it collapses. Too late, and it burns." Kramer snorted. "You said you had a confession or a case, Wolfe. Which is it?" "Both," Wolfe said, unfazed. "A confession is a verbal act. A case is an intellectual one. Tonight, you shall have the latter first, and the former will follow, as naturally as digestion after dinner." "Get on with it," Kramer muttered. Wolfe inclined his head slightly, then looked toward Fritz. "Mr. Brenner, please remain seated. I will speak plainly so there is no confusion. You are innocent." Fritz's lips parted, but no sound came out. Ilse Bäumer gave a low laugh. "How gallant! You exonerate your servant before the facts." "Phooey," Wolfe said, softly, but with enough weight to still her. "Mr. Brenner is my chef, not my servant, and his honesty is as verifiable as your guilt." Her eyes flashed. "You have no proof." "On the contrary," Wolfe said, "Mr. Goodwin, if you please." That was my cue. I opened the drawer of Wolfe's desk and withdrew the small box we'd prepared, a velvet case containing one polished piece of silverware, its handle engraved with the crest of House Bäumer. I held it up, letting it catch the light. Wolfe had retrieved the utensil from his office safe earlier that evening. "This fork," I said, "came from a set of 12 sold at post-war auction by the Viennese Liquidation Authority. 11 are accounted for in collectors' hands. The 12th, I nodded toward Wolfe, was found in a package mailed to this address." Kramer took it, turning it over in his fingers. So? Wolfe said. So, Inspector, this is the missing utensil from the Boymer set, the one Mrs. Boymer herself declared lost during the annexation. Its presence in that parcel, together with the coded ledger page we recovered from Fritz's pantry, demonstrates not theft from her, but concealment by her. She did not lose her husband's fortune. She laundered it. Kramer's eyes narrowed. You're saying she killed to keep it hidden? Precisely. She mailed the fork to me, believing I would destroy or return it rather than risk contamination by scandal. When I did not oblige, she moved to raise all who might expose her. Weigel, Dawn, even Miss Lentz. Greta flinched. She told me to burn the ledgers, she whispered, said they were dangerous lies. Wolfe turned his gaze on her, steady, not unkind. You were frightened, Miss Lentz, but your fear was conscience. You will not be punished for that. Mrs. Boymer's composure cracked. You think you understand Vienna, Mr. Wolfe? You think you can judge what it was to live through that? To see your name, your family, your husband's life's work stolen. I took what was ours. I only protected it. Kramer stepped forward. Protected it by killing people. She lifted her chin. They would have destroyed us. Dawn threatened me. He said he'd tell the Americans everything, turn us into criminals. Wolfe's voice deepened. You turned yourself into one when you strangled him with a napkin, madam. Symbolic, but crude. Her mouth opened, but the words failed her. Wolfe gestured toward me again. Mr. Goodwin. I placed another item on the desk, a manila envelope containing the photostats of the coded recipe entries. Rows of coded entries, each corresponding to recipes from the House Boymer cookbook. Wolfe said, Inspector, you will find that each transaction corresponds to a wartime seizure, property, artworks, bank holdings, reconstituted through American dining establishments. Mrs. Boymer's investments were the engines of her husband's empire, and when peace came, she washed them clean with truffles and wine lists. Kramer grunted, rubbing his forehead. Hell. Language, Inspector, Wolfe murmured. We are in the presence of ladies. I couldn't resist. Some ladies more than others. That earned me Wolfe's sidelong glare, the one that says enough, Archie, but doesn't really mean it. Kramer put the fork down. You're saying she used restaurants to move Nazi money? Wolfe nodded once. And when her network began to crumble under investigation, she eliminated its weakest links. Weigel first, his death a warning to Dawn, then Dawn himself. Miss Lentz survived only because she ran before the final course was served. Mrs. Boymer's voice turned sharp. You have no witnesses, only your arrogance. Pfui, Wolfe said again, louder this time. I have witnesses, I have documents, but most damning, I have your behavior. He leaned forward slightly, enough to make the air tighten. When I revealed that the fork matched the missing piece from your estate, your pupils dilated, your pulse quickened. You reached for your handbag, where you kept the revolver you brought tonight, thinking perhaps to reprise your earlier efficiency. Kramer's head jerked toward her. Gun? I nodded. Same one she dropped during dinner. Fibre and ligature impressions matched the restaurant napkin's weave and logo. We checked. Kramer's jaw tightened. You've been holding out on me. Merely allowing the soufflé to rise, Wolfe said. For a moment, nobody spoke. The silence had weight. Then Mrs. Boymer sagged back in the chair, her composure dissolving into something raw. I only wanted it gone, she said softly. The fork, the books, the names, all of it. I wanted to live without the past. You cannot, Wolfe said. No one can. The past is indigestible when left unexamined. Kramer took out his handcuffs. All right, Mrs. Boymer, you're coming with me. She didn't resist this time. Fritz made a small sound, a sigh, maybe a prayer, as Kramer led her out, with Stebbins waiting in the hall for the escort. The door closed behind them, leaving the room feeling oddly bigger. For a while no one moved. Then Greta spoke. Is it over? Yes, Wolfe said, and no. Restitution will require years, but justice has begun its course. Fritz cleared his throat. Mr. Wolfe, thank you. Wolfe waved a hand. Nonsense, you are my chef, my comfort, my sustenance. To impugn you was to impugn my table, that I cannot abide. His tone softened, a rare thing. You will prepare breakfast tomorrow as usual. Something simple. We are not celebrating, We are restoring equilibrium." "Yes, sir," Fritz said, eyes shining. Wolfe turned to Greta. "Miss Lentz, you will assist Inspector Kramer in formalizing your statement. I have ensured that your role in these events will be recognized as cooperative. Mr. Goodwin will drive you." Greta nodded. "I don't know how to thank you." "By cooking honestly when you next do so," Wolfe said. "Cuisine, like truth, must not be adulterated." She gave a shaky smile. "Yes, sir." When she left, the brownstone finally exhaled. I shut the door and leaned against it. "Well, boss, I'd call it poetic justice, but poetry doesn't usually come with police paperwork." Wolfe's eyes half closed, pleased despite himself. "Archie, your facility for vulgar metaphor is boundless, but apt." "Thanks," I said. "So what now? Beer?" He looked at me, considering. "Yes, pour." I went to the sideboard, filled 2 chilled glasses, and handed him one. He lifted it solemnly. "To restoration," he said. "And to decent hours of sleep," I added. He sipped, then sighed. "Sleep is for the unburdened. I have orchids at 9. "Of course you do." He leaned back, the tension easing from his massive frame. "Mr. Goodwin," he said quietly, "see that our friend is fed." For a second I thought he meant Fritz, then realized he did. It wasn't an order, it was an absolution. "Right," I said. "I'll make sure he eats, even if I have to cook it myself." That earned me the faintest rumble, half chuckle, half warning. Heaven preserve us from that. "Hey, I can fry an egg." "You can burn an egg," Wolfe corrected. "Which is an entirely different art," I grinned. "Then I'll leave the art to him. You've got enough masterpieces for one night." He didn't answer, just closed his eyes, the lines of his face settling into something that almost looked peaceful. The orchids would get their attention in the morning. The world could wait until then. The clock ticked past 12:30. The city outside was quiet for once, and in the brownstone justice had been served, piping hot, plated in truth, and seasoned with Wolfe's peculiar brand of genius. I finished my beer, typed the final notes, and looked around the office, our courtroom, our confessional, our kitchen of reason. And as I turned off the lamp, I thought, whatever else New York might cook up next, it would have to wait until after breakfast.